Hello, thank you for joining us for July 2007. This is Birdwise. I'm Tom Schooley. In addition to our regular features, the calendar, news, and feather report, we'll have our Birdwise educator tell us about various bird mating systems. We'll conclude our series of the Two Tales of Two Pigeons. We'll take a visit to Tolmie State Park. We'll dip into the email bag again, but first, a bird from our sponsor. The Birdwise Bird of the Month for July 2007 is the Osprey, Pandion haliatus. This is a fairly common breeding bird in Thurston County and throughout Washington, always near bodies of water. This hawk feeds almost exclusively on fish. Ospreys migrate south to spend the winter in Central and South America. Ospreys build stick nests in dead or open-top trees or on anything resembling a tree. More material is added to the nests each year, and some nests reach a weight of 1/2 ton. 3 or 4 whitish-pink eggs with olive-brown streaks are incubated by the female, with the male bringing food to her during the 5 to 6 week incubation period. An osprey catches fish by hovering 30 to 100 feet over the water and then diving in feet first. Often this requires the bird to completely submerge. It surfaces, rises into the air with the fish, and shakes off the water. The osprey almost always rotates the fish to carry it head first. Now for something completely different. Let's go to our Birdwise educator, Bert Gutman, as he introduces us to the mating systems of birds.
Well, last month we were starting to get into the topic of reproductive behavior, and I think one of the first things we ought to talk about is mating systems. That is, what kinds of arrangements are there between males and females for the subject of reproduction. Usually when we think about birds mating, we probably think about a monogamous arrangement. That is, one male and one female, all paired up and staying that way. And that's a good way to think about birds, because probably 90% of all species are essentially monogamous. They remain in some kind of a paired arrangement, one male and one female, for a pretty long term. Birds have been called the most monogamous of all animals. And these arrangements can really last for a lifetime. So, for example, studies have been done on mute swans, which seem to mate for life, and it's found that in a breeding pair, probably no more than about 5% of the breeding pairs will break up in any one season. But there are alternatives. Depending upon ecological conditions, as we'll see, there are alternative mating systems that you can generally call polygamy. But there are different kinds of polygamy. For example, one kind is polygyny, that is, an arrangement where one male mates in some way with several females. Now, there are various versions of this, but our own common red-winged blackbird commonly engages in polygyny, where a male can have a harem of several females. And the graph here shows a study that was done here in Washington State on red-winged blackbird males in one marsh and the number of females that they had in their harems. And you can see that the most common number was about 2 or 3, but there were several of them that had more than that number of females. One guy apparently even had 15 in his harem. There's a variation on this that we see in some of the large flightless birds like rheas and emus. In this situation, a male can mate with several females, but they all deposit their eggs in a single nest, and then the male is responsible for incubating all of the eggs in that nest. Well, another variation on polygamy is polyandry, in this case where one female mates with several males. And one of the interesting things about this arrangement is that our own common spotted sandpiper, which we see so often around our lakes and rivers, engages in polyandry. The female is about 25% bigger than the male on average, and the females defend territories in much the same way that males of other species defend their territory. And within this territory, a female will have several males that she mates with. And for each of the males, she deposits her eggs in a different nest, and the male is responsible for sitting on those eggs, for incubating them, and for defending that nest and that territory against other males and against predators. And if it should happen that one of the males loses these eggs, then the female comes and very quickly replenishes the eggs in that nest. Well, why does all of this happen? It happens because these are various ways of maximizing the reproductive potential of the species. And there are serious ecological matters here, ecological concerns. The general rule seems to be something like this, where it's possible, because the environment is so rich, or because the food is so rich, where it's possible for a single parent to raise all of the young in a nest, all of those in a brood, then you get polygamy of some sort. But if the ecological conditions are such that it takes both parents to supply enough food to raise all of the young in the nest, then the two have to cooperate. And in that case, you have to have some kind of a monogamous arrangement. So I hope you can grab your binoculars and go out and observe some of these birds. And I hope that when you're looking at red-winged blackbirds or when you're looking at spotted sandpipers, you look at them with in a slightly different way, knowing something more about the way they behave, the way they breed.
Last month I told a tale of a pigeon called the dodo. This month we have a tale of a much better known pigeon. Estimates of this pigeon's abundance range from 3 to 5 billion birds, representing upwards of 40% of all the birds in North America. The species was the passenger pigeon, Ectopistes migratorius. One description of the immensity of these flocks is from Chief Simon Pokagon of the Potawatomi tribe in Michigan. If the Great Spirit in his wisdom could have created a more elegant bird in plumage, form, and movement, he never did. I have seen them move in one unbroken column for hours across the sky like some great river, ever varying in hue, and as the mighty stream, sweeping on at 60 miles an hour, reached some deep valley, it would pour its living mass headlong down hundreds of feet, sounding as though a whirlwind was abroad in the land. Passenger pigeons lived in the hardwood forests of eastern North America. The pigeons fed on the vast quantities of beechnuts, acorns, and maple masts. The massive flocks would descend on a forest and feed for days until the trees were stripped bare and the ground inundated with pigeon guano. Then they moved on to another area with ripe pickings. At night they roosted in swamps or woodlands, settling in the trees in groups and often on top of each other several layers high. Passenger pigeons nested in dense colonies. A small colony might have occupied 20 acres, larger ones 1,000 acres. The largest colony described was in Wisconsin in 1871. It was in an L shape of 100 miles long and 3 to 10 miles wide. Passenger pigeons were reported from northeastern Washington. A pair was noted in Spokane Falls in about 1869. Another report exists of the birds arriving in April 1866, laying 2 eggs in June on open ground and departing by October. It is unclear if this was a one-time occurrence or a repeated event. Why did the passenger pigeon disappear? There may have been several contributing factors, but it is certain that humans were involved. Passenger pigeons were tasty, and market hunters slaughtered them by the millions year after year. In 1874, in one nesting colony in Michigan, 25,000 birds were killed daily for 28 days. Another report from 1883 speaks of over 2 million pigeons shipped out of Monroe County in Wisconsin in one spring. The advent of the railroad allowed shipments to reach the eastern cities before the cargo rotted. Tremendous quantities of birds, actually of many species, were shot or netted and sent to market at all times of year. The slaughter of the young squabs removed the next generation, and the population declined quickly in the last half of the 1800s. Another significant factor was the felling of the eastern forests. As land was cleared to make way for farms, the pigeons lost their food sources, and the last nest in the wild of a passenger pigeon was reported in 1894. One of the last reports of wild passenger pigeons was published in Scribner's magazine. The author was none other than Teddy Roosevelt, who described a small flock of a dozen or so pigeons he saw in May of 1907. Unlike the dodo, the extinction of the passenger pigeon is well documented. It occurred on September 1, 1914 at 1 p.m. at the Cleveland Zoo. Her name was Martha, and she now rests in the Smithsonian Institution. This continent's billions of passenger pigeons disappeared in a mere 50 years. Of the passenger pigeon, John James Audubon wrote, "When an individual is seen gliding through the woods and close to the observer, it passes like a thought, and on trying to see it again, the eye searches in vain. The bird is gone." These lessons of these two tales are clear, but not necessarily learned. The massive slaughter of wildlife for food and fashion markets is largely gone in North America, but it still lives in other parts of the world. The clearing of the forests and fields is as rampant today as ever. Witness our own county's economic policies, which allow every project to go forward in spite of the clear degradation of habitats and our own quality of life. Let's go now to the calendar and news with Sheila McCartan.
This is the time of year for thousands of volunteers across the country to get out and participate in the North American Breeding Bird Survey. The BBS is a long-term, large-scale international avian monitoring program initiated in 1966 to track the status and trends of North American bird populations. The BBS is a cooperative effort between the U.S. Geological Survey's Patuxent Wildlife Research Center and the Canadian Wildlife Service's National Wildlife Research Center. Following a rigorous protocol, BBS data are collected by dedicated participants along thousands of randomly established roadside routes throughout the continent. There are a number of routes in Washington state that local birders monitor. Researchers and statisticians compile these population data and population trend analysis on more than 400 bird species for use by conservation managers, scientists, and the general public. You can find out more about the breeding bird surveys on their website listed here. And now for the calendar. Nisqually National Wildlife Refuge's 20th annual summer lecture series will be held every Wednesday evening in July and August, starting July 11th. Topics include butterflies, fire, earthquakes, forest canopies, dragonflies, climate change, whales, and wildlife. For a complete schedule and more information, go to fws/Nisqually or call the office at 753-9467. The City of Olympia Parks and Recreation Department has some great outdoor activities planned for this summer. You can easily include bird watching into these events. For instance, try exploring Puget Sound from a sea kayak. There is a trip on Saturday, July 21st to Ketron Island, and on Saturday, August 25th on the Nisqually Delta. The Outdoor Adventure staff will be leading these fun and educational kayak tours. The tours are beginner-oriented and are in calm, protected areas. Surprise visits from wildlife friends are promised. The cost of each trip is $49. If kayaking isn't your thing, then join the outdoor staff on a fun and scenic day hike trip. There are several planned to the Olympic National Forest, including one on Sunday, July 22nd to the South Forks Skokomish River, and one on Saturday, August 18th to the Lower Lena Lake. Bring your camera, binoculars, lunch, and hiking boots. These trips are rated between easy and moderate. The cost for the hiking trips is $29. On Sunday, August 26th, enjoy spectacular natural splendor on a float trip of the Lower Nisqually River. Birds and other wildlife are often seen along the riverbanks. Experienced guides steer professional quality rafts. The $79 fee includes all rafting equipment and a fantastic buffet lunch. This trip is sponsored by the Tumwater Parks and Recreation, so for more information call them at 754-4160 or check out their website listed on your screen. For a complete listing of the contact information mentioned here, email us at tctvbirdwise@yahoo.com. We'll close our report today with our avian forecast for July by tailman Tom Schooley. Hey Tom, what's happening?
Breeding is still going on in July. Birds are bringing off their second and third broods of the summer, but the singing tapers off quickly by the end of the month. Fall migration actually begins in July, with shorebirds starting to move south. Baby birds are quite common at this point in time. Please leave them alone. They'll probably have their parents out grocery shopping and they'll be back soon.
I'm going to talk a little bit about bird baths, and I think one of the best bird baths is a hanging bird bath because it's safe from predators and you can keep your eye on it. The birds love it. If you hang it underneath the tree, they've got an immediate place to fly to in case they get threatened, and they're not subject to cat attacks. You can also have a standing bird bath, and the important thing to remember when you have a bird bath is not to have it too deep. Usually 2 or 3 inches is all that's needed. The birds are very comfortable in a shallower water than they are in a deeper water. They feel more confident. They will use a bird bath both for drinking and for bathing. It's important that they keep their feathers in good flight condition, and they do that by bathing. You can have a tall bird bath, standing 30, 36 inches tall, or you can have a short bird bath, and if you have a short bird bath and you stick it in your flower bed, just sort of keep an eye on it so that the cats aren't using that as a favorite place to hang around, because they can really sneak up on the birds, and if the birds are wet, it puts them at a disadvantage. They can't get away quite as quickly. It's a good idea to change your bird bath water daily because the birds obviously do use it for bathing.
Tolmie State Park is on the shores of Nisqually Reach. Let's go there and see what it has to offer. Tolmie State Park is a 105-acre marine day-use park with 1,800 feet of shoreline on Puget Sound. The beach is a popular spot in the summer, so much so that the delicate salt marsh and once narrow beach has been protected and reinforced by the addition of truckloads of gravel. Even still, the park offers great habitat for bird watching. You will almost always find heron fishing either in the marsh or along the shore. While the beach is popular, few people seem to use the 3 miles of hiking trails that meander through the deep woods adjacent to the water. Take the trail slowly. Listen closely. Take time to sit and wait, and you'll see our common birds of the northwest forests. we have a question from the email bag, which goes, why is there woodpeckers banging on the eaves of my house? It's waking me up at 4 o'clock in the morning. The answer is, woodpeckers engage in territorial drumming, which is the way they sing, instead of like the songbirds that sing songs. Anyways, they sort of try to compete as to who can knock on things the loudest, and your eaves trough is probably one of the most echoey things around, and they rather like it.
We'll close today's show with a bit of a quiz. Which hawk has reversible outer toes? Well, that's the osprey. It has 2 toes forward and 2 toes backwards, unlike the other hawks, which have 3 toes forward and 1 toe backwards. Also, the pads of the toes are spiny to help the osprey hold on to a fish. How big are the fish an osprey catches? Well, ospreys like medium-sized fish of 1/4 to 1/3 of a pound. This makes the fish about 1/4 of the weight of the bird itself. As this is a good-sized meal, other birds try and often succeed in stealing the osprey's fish. Are ospreys endangered? Ospreys were never on the official endangered species list. In Washington, population declines were noted in the 1950s due to persecution and DDT. Breeding bird survey data shows an increase of 10+% from 1966 to 1991. Their numbers seem stable now.